This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anna Teider. My guest today is Michelle Grosser. Michelle is a former attorney and law professor turned mom, motherhood coach, and host of the Calm Mom podcast, in which she discusses high-impact habits, work-life rhythms, parenting, marriage, spirituality, and much, much more. Michelle, hi and welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
I am looking forward to our conversation. And as a person who switched professional paths in life, I would love to hear about yours and how this happened.
Yeah, I love that. I love that we share that. What do they call it? Multi-passionate?
Yes.
Multi-passionate.
But also, really... I'm sorry to interrupt you, but also having the courage to say no to certain things at a certain point in life, to be like, you know what, I've done this. For me, it was marketing and corporate life, and for you, it's law. So it takes, in my experience, it takes a lot of guts.
It does take a lot of guts. And I think for me, one of the reminders through that transition has been that, you know, with every yes, inevitably comes a no, right? It just like comes hand in hand that we can't do it all. So if I was going to make more space for this new calling and this new purposing and this new passion, I knew necessarily I was going to have to say no to something. So like you're saying, does that mean it was easy? No. Does that mean there were times where I'm like, am I crazy? Like exactly. I'm turning down a regular paycheck to go out and do something. I'm so used to using, you know, a part of my brain that's really good at analysis and technical writing. And, you know, the law is just so heady. And then to flip that upside down and start a project that feels very creative and coaching that feels like a little woo-woo sometimes, where I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel like me. It's such a stretch at every turn. But man, I think it does take a lot of courage. I think that's true. And I think it takes a lot of surrender. And I think sometimes when we think of the word surrender, we think it's like throwing in the towel. But surrender, I'm noticing, is actually quite an active verb. So it requires us to do a lot of things while understanding that we don't have to understand everything in the moment and see the big picture in the moment, and believing that as we learn to trust our intuition and all of these different gifts that we have that help guide us, that we'll see it full picture at some point.
You know, I'm listening and I'm thinking how what just happened to me is I am starting to teach in September. Officially, I'm teaching at a university, and I'm becoming a professor of writing and communication. And that for me is closing the full circle of giving up on that corporate career and embarking on this new thing, which was writing. Yeah. And I always felt a little bit, no matter how many awards I won and books I published and everything else, I always felt a little guilty. And I was always like, this is a hobby, you know? And now all of these experiences, as you say, and all of these decisions and everything I've done in the last 15 years, everything is so beautifully coming full circle in the fact that I'm going to start teaching and passing on and handing on all this knowledge and experience to young people. So it's always, every single thing you do, sooner or later you learn why, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. It is. Like every move is one move on the chess piece, you know, and in isolation, it's worthless. It seems like it means nothing. Sometimes it feels like there's no strategy, but then, you know, you get a few more moves in and you're like, oh, that's why they did that.
But so tell me, I did my switch when I burned out. But it sounds to me like, did this happen for you when you became a mom?
Well, I think part of it is yes. I went to law school because I thought that's what I should do,
Mm-hmm.
even though no one in my family was an attorney, no one was expecting me to do that. I graduated from undergrad in 2008, and at that time in the U.S., there just wasn't a lot of job opportunity. That was a time of recession, and so I went to law school, and then I became a lawyer because that's what I thought I should do. I knew I was, quote unquote, smart, and I did not have an understanding of all the ways in which my talents and giftings could be used. So I was like, oh, you become a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or some other professional. And I think, I did that for 12 years, and then I had children. And man, at that point, I had my own law practice. And, 3, 4, 5 weeks in, I have my baby with me at the office, taking calls with her, breastfeeding just to keep her quiet. And exactly what you're speaking of, just running myself into the ground without really seeing it coming because I just was going so fast. So I think, yes, that was a part of it. And then I think another part of it was just as I fell into that burnout, I think it forced me to slow down a bit and take stock in like, is this actually me? Like, am I doing this because this feels aligned for me, or this feels like where I'm at in this season of my life? Or am I doing this because for whatever reasons, I've been conditioned to believe that this is what I should be doing, but it's actually doing very little to light me up inside. And it was, like so many people, I think during the pandemic, it just kind of forced us to slow down. And I also just became more aware in that season that so many of the women in my circle, my friend group, my family, my community of faith, like all of these different women were just, it was hard. It was hard. And it was finally a time where all of us felt like we were at our wits' end and, we're stuck confined with our partners. And maybe we hadn't been in that close proximity before. And now we're homeschooling our kids. And it just feels like everything is unraveling. And I kept hearing the same things over and over and over. And man, I just had that moment where it was like 3 a.m. and I woke up and I'm like, I just feel so strongly to create a space to help to be part of a solution, to bring people in who can help resource these women. Like there's so much parenting stuff out there and I think it's beautiful and necessary, but kind of like your vision with this podcast, Anna, it's like, but the woman of the mom, let's not forget her. And that really became kind of the driving force behind what is now the Calm Mom podcast and the coaching that I'm doing and this community that we've grown.
Tell me a little bit about the podcast and the coaching.
Yeah. So it started with this vision of doing motherhood coaching. And I did a year-long coaching intensive. I became certified as a master coach. I had 400 hours of coaching experience. And it's so funny how life works because I went into that thinking like, this is really what I want to do, but I need some tools. Like I need some tools in my toolbox. So I'm not just giving advice, right? I felt, really the strong conviction. I'm not going to give advice, but I want to really be able to equip these women, thinking I was entering this program to get tools to help other women. And holy moly, I tell you, my entire paradigm of myself and my identity and my past and the world just got shifted 180. And it really opened my eyes. Yeah, as it does, right? It's like we think we're going to help others and we're so blessed in the process. And through that, so it started out with the podcast was initially called the Motherhood podcast. And I was going to be doing motherhood coaching to really help women preserve and keep and rediscover their identity in motherhood. But then on the new year, the more I started looking into all of this, I was seeing that this kind of theme I was seeing and what women really needed and what was underlying a lot of the struggles they're facing is a dysregulation in their nervous system, and actually learning tools to identify the state of their nervous system and then be able to regulate it. Moms don't have all of this disposable time. Busy women do not have all this disposable time. So I became certified as a neurological fitness expert where I can teach women how to go from a really, a sympathetic state, we call it, where they feel really agitated or stressed or aggravated or angry, or on the opposite, where they're feeling really burnt out or detached or numbed out, and use these tools that take 2 or 3 minutes, exercises for their nervous system to bring them back into this parasympathetic state where they find a sense of quote unquote calm, a sense of compassion, where they're able to use the part of their brain, that prefrontal cortex that really allows us to respond to things, our partners, our children, our workspaces, instead of react to them. And that's really the work that I'm doing now. That's what we're teaching on the Calm Mom podcast. And that's the coaching that I'm doing these days, a lot of nervous system work.
Well, I wish I came across you and this topic much earlier, because when I was a young mom, when Kai was very little, we went through quite a rough time because my husband was diagnosed with cancer again and had to go through chemo, and it was very stressful. And unfortunately, I would lose my nerves sometimes and yell at my child. And I'm still so upset at myself about this. Yeah, I'm glad that you're out there to help mothers, because I'm sure I'm not the only one with this.
No. Yeah. There's no way around it. It's really, really hard. And it's not only really, really hard, but we also really, really care. Yeah. Right? We really care and we want to do well. And it's our number one priority, and our world has been turned upside down, and this new life has been put into our hands, and it's changed the whole dynamic of life as we know it. And sometimes, especially for women, and I'll speak for myself, it often felt in my eyes like my life got changed 100%, and like my husband was kind of going about his day like he used to before. And so much resentment and so much anger would come up in me. And I didn't have the tools at that time. I was so unaware of it. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just like a jerk now.
Yeah. I know, me too. Who is this person? Why am I this yelling, screaming, hysterical asshole? Sorry, pardon my French.
Yeah, I felt that way too. And my husband's like, dude, you're not fun to be around anymore. And I'm like, it doesn't feel very fun for me either. But we all experience it. Yeah. We all do. And we've all lost it on our kids. I yell at my kids too sometimes, and it's part of life. And as we grow in these tools, especially with nervous system regulation and our understanding of how this stuff works, it's like, it's going to happen because we're human. But also, man, there is so much beautiful parenting to be done and coaching and teaching to be done after we've lost it on our kids, because they're going to lose it on someone too. Right. And it's like, we can show them accountability. We can show them how, even though we're their parents, we can apologize to them. We can show them how we'll try to change things and, not let it get to that point next time, and that they can actually trust us to try to do that. And also that we don't have to hide and suppress our feelings. It's a huge thing. So it kind of sucks that it happens that we have to, yell at them. But man, is there so much good that can come out of that. And it's never really too late for that repair process.
I'm happy you're out there to coach young moms. Let's talk about mom. Let's talk about Mom Nancy. Tell me about her. Tell me about her life.
My mom. Okay. So I grew up in a really small town in northern Maine, which is on the border of French-speaking New Brunswick in Canada. Mm-hmm. So it's on about 20 miles east of the border of Quebec. And that whole community the ancestry is French Acadian. So these are people 3-4 generations ago who fled France because of religious persecution. And they ended up in my little hometown in northern Maine. And then a group of them ended up working their way down to Louisiana, another state here in the States. And that's the Cajun ancestry, Acadian Cajun. It's the same group of people. But my mom's parents didn't speak English. Her dad had an 8th grade education. This was an agrarian, they were potato farmers. There was a paper mill in our town. That's where my grandfather worked. And my mom grew up as the 6th of 10 children.
Oh, wow. All from one mom?
All from one mom. Yeah.
What a superhero.
Yeah. My grandmother, right?
Yes.
Superhero. And then all of my aunts and uncles just went on to have, a majority of them really large families. Like I'm the oldest of 5. So my mom was one of 10. She had 5 of her own children. So it's just kind of I think it's really interesting to be raised with so many people and then have so many of your own people. is in that there's not a lot of space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that now when I look back, I'm like, oh, wow, it's so interesting how the things that I'm noticing now, like the loss of maybe your own identity and your own desires and your own interests and your own hobbies, because there's not really space for that. There's too much going on.
Mm-hmm.
There maybe is too much, survival.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of how she grew up. And she was the first one in her family to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
And not only did she go to college, but she left the state. So she left her family at 18 and moved out of a little French-speaking town where we were and moved to another state, Michigan. And she moved to Detroit and went to school there and was the first one really to meet people from other places and bring them home and just step out of her comfort zone. And I think when she looks back at that, it feels like inconsequential to her, but I think she doesn't even realize what she set, the trajectory that she set her family on for all 5 of us now, and the ways in which we live and operate and think and the patterns that we have because of her bravery, really, her courage, her willingness to do that.
What did she study?
She studied education. Mm-hmm. She was a teacher for a while. She was in ministry for a while. She was in social work for a while. And that's really where I remember it in my, middle school, high school years, where her job was kind of going around and working with different foster parents and teaching them parenting skills. So even part now of my transition has felt even full circle in that, that part of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So she worked even when she had you guys. So she had 5 children and she worked?
She had 5 children and she worked. And she just, my dad, when I was born, was a potato farmer. He had a potato farm. And then, my parents had 2 kids and then they had 3 kids. And a small potato farm is not a reliable source of income for a growing family. One season with blight or with a frost or something like that, and you lose the whole. So then he started working at a small chemical plant, and then he actually became the overnight janitor at my high school, and then he became a truck driver for a while. So all these different jobs, but throughout all of that, she had to work. Our family needed income, and she did a lot of different things. Like I spoke about, she went a period where she opened up a daycare in our home, and there was I would wake up and there'd be 22-year-olds in our living room, and she was doing something like that. So she was always very active. And I have 2 children. I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I work, and I have a husband who works, and I cannot imagine working like she did, doing what she did, raising 5 kids with a husband who was either on the road or was working a night shift and sleeping during the day. It's remarkable.
It's incredible. Did she have any help?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a small town where people didn't really leave. So her parents lived, a 10-minute walk. They lived down the street. My dad's parents lived a 15-minute drive. So they were around, but it wasn't intimate in the sense that, they were kind of devoted to helping our family, because my grandmother had 10 kids. My other grandmother had 5 kids. They had, I don't even know the number, but I think my grandmother had 47 or 40 something grandchildren by the time I was, you know what I mean? So it's you can only be so involved. So I think I'm the oldest, and I think in a lot of ways I did help. I think there were a lot of responsibilities and household stuff that maybe my friends weren't necessarily doing, but my mom had 5 kids in 8 years. So it's not even like I was that much older than my siblings.
I want to go back a little, because now I learned that she came back to the town she was from. So she came back right after she finished college. And where did she meet your dad?
Yeah, so she came back. Her and my dad were actually in the same class in the same high school, but they didn't really know each other or hang out or remember each other. They both went away for school, came back, and then just ran into each other and started dating and were married. And that's, they knew of each other, but they didn't know each other until they really met. Yeah.
So what happened after you guys left home? Did she always continue working?
No, she didn't. She stopped working when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about burnout. It just wasn't a term back then.
Yeah.
And I think that she didn't slow down. So her body just stopped. And she went for a period where she couldn't get out of bed. I think there were a lot of battles. I think burnout was definitely at the forefront. And then I think within that comes a lot of things. It comes anxiety, it comes depression, it comes mental illness, to the point where she was actually on disability. And that was the last she really worked. In the last maybe in the last decade or so, she's done little projects here and there. But she never was really, full force back into the workforce. That was kind of shut her down.
Has she recovered? How is she doing now?
She has. She's grown so much. As I'm like saying all of this, I don't know if she's going to ever listen to this episode. And I don't want to project on her. And I also don't want to sanitize my memories and present them as they weren't. But she's someone who, and I think a lot of us can be, I don't know if warning is the right word, but can take caution from her story, in that, to go from one of 10 kids to having 5 of your own children and just give and give and give, and then be in social work and the foster care system and give and give and give. And you talk about, lessons our moms teach us. Like, I don't remember her having her own friends. Again, this is my memory, but I don't remember her having her own friends. I don't remember her having her own hobbies. I don't remember her having date nights with my dad. I just don't remember these things that now, as a mom, a married woman, I cling to so tightly, because I think there's a subconscious part of me that's like, I kind of saw her give it all until there was almost literally nothing left.
Did we jump into the first lesson now?
Yeah.
Which is, don't give it all until there's nothing left.
Don't give it all. Yeah. And I think so much of that is, it's not overt. Like those words would have never come out of her mouth. I don't even know how aware she even was of that pattern. And I think maybe part of it was a cultural thing. Her mom never had a job. I mean, 10 kids, like her whole mission, purpose, life was to just raise these children and pour everything into that. And that is, there's a nobility to that. I'm not undermining that. But when you do it at the expense of your own health and identity and joy and a lot of these things, it's quite costly, and it doesn't serve you well. And it also doesn't serve your children well. It's a lesson. Yeah.
It's interesting how times have changed. I'm reading a book about a lady that said in Tudor times, and it's crazy reading about the mortality, children's mortality. And women used to have so many children, because, they had to keep the line going, and they needed somebody to inherit everything and take care of them when they were older, but B, because so few of children would survive. But so it used to be a woman's role for so many thousands of years, but things are changing now. Or let's say things should be changing now. Yeah. There is more to motherhood and to our existence as women than that.
It is changing. It should continue to change. And a huge part of it is just having conversations like this.
Yes.
Right? Like just bringing it to the forefront and discussing it and sharing our stories and sharing our lessons. That's a big part of the first step, which is just growing in awareness of like, is this really how we should be doing this? Does this actually serve us best as a society?
And recognize that times change, and what our mothers did isn't necessarily what and how we should be doing that.
Yes.
Do you have other lessons for me?
I do. I think one of the things that she really taught me, and she never, again, said these words, but when I look back, I'm like, man, and I try to be intentional about it with my own kids, is that she really taught me that I have infinite worth just by my existence. I never felt like her love for me was conditioned upon an achievement or showing up in a certain way or the way in which I did or didn't speak to her or take care of my siblings or any of these other things. Like I just remember this feeling that I was so special just because I was hers and just because I was born. And I think that is such a powerful gift that we can give our children. And I think, again, talk about times changing. I think this one is kind of on the other swing of the pendulum, where we have become such an achievement-driven society as parents, especially in the Western world. And I don't think that's serving our children well. I don't think it's for the best. I think we're seeing kids growing up with intense anxiety disorders and stress and what it takes to get into a quote unquote good college these days and all of these expectations we're putting on them. And I think, the more I speak to young people, even just like a generation before mine or after mine, the feelings that their parents put on them about the ways in which I have to go up and perform and the pressure it's heavy. And I really never felt any of that with my mom. And I'm so grateful and thankful because it really opened up so many more doors for me. I never really felt pigeonholed or like I had to, the sense of obligation and urgency and stress that I think a lot of kids are growing up with today. I'm just so grateful that wasn't a lesson that she taught me. She never put that on me.
Michelle, this is so beautiful and so important and so deep. As you were speaking, I was wondering, when did you become aware of the fact that she did this and how valuable it is?
When I started having my own children. I was completely oblivious before. And then when I started having my own kids and I would, and doing my own work, right? My own inner work and realizing like, oh, when my, 4-year-old daughter in pre-K gets an award at the end of the year, that brings up a feeling inside of me that I'm like, oh, this is probably not great. Like I should not be more proud of her today than I was yesterday, and kind of like checking myself and being like, I'm not putting this on her. I'm not picking her up after school. And the first thing I ask about is, hey, what'd you get on your spelling test? Like, I'm not going to do that to her. And the more that I realized and grew in that consciousness, I'm like, wow, I'm so grateful I have this. Like, where did this come from? Where did this awareness come from? And like thinking back, man, I'm so grateful that my mom never did that to me, because I've talked to so many women and so many people where it wasn't the same story. And it's so much pressure.
But it's very interesting. We moved to Europe 2 years ago, and it's fascinating seeing how much less this culture is driven by achievement and competition and all of this, which is good and bad in its way. My husband and I talk about this a lot because it's interesting now to see our child grow up in this environment. And sometimes we're like, this is amazing. And sometimes we're like, oh my God, but they'll never learn what one day real life is like. A and B, this is why America is full of these incredible innovations and startups and everything in balance. This is what I want to say. Yeah. No extremes are good. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't say that to say also that I don't care about my kids' grades or anything like that.
Yeah,
but I will connect with them, right? And care about their being and their essence. And then maybe after dinner, I'll ask how the spelling test went, because it is important, but it's not how they earn my love and my attention. And I don't want it to be.
Yeah, but we have to mention for the non-American listeners that the environment in America is extremely competitive and really pushing kids. It's stressful for kids, I have to say. I'm glad that Kai doesn't have that stress. Which middle school you'll get in and which high school you'll get in. I mean, in big cities, it starts with preschools. We were in Los Angeles when Kai started preschool, and you can't imagine interview processes.
For a 4-year-old. I'm like, oh my God.
It's crazy.
Like, I don't know how many shapes she knows. I don't know.
That was a beautiful lesson. Do you have more?
I do. I think another thing that she taught me, and this one was a little bit more overt, was that she really taught me how resilient I am, but she did it in a way that was so affirming and that was so like I would come to her and sometimes be like, I'm so overwhelmed. I've got, I can't handle all of this. And she would never dismiss it. And this is something that I realized as an adult. Like, it would have been so easy for her to be like, well, yeah, Michelle, you're in law school and you're working at a bar until 5 a.m. and you're not sleeping and you're not taking care of yourself. And like, yeah, like you need to chill out. Or like, it would have been just so easy for her to dismiss that or, tell me, give me advice or something. And she always validated it. And I can't tell you like the comfort and the strength that I found in that validation. And then would come, the encouragement about my resilience and, wherever the conversation would lead. But I remember when I first got married and I would get overwhelmed or whatever it was that was coming up. And I would bring it to my husband and be like, you'll never believe like this person said and that person. And now I'm like, have to do this and that and pick up all this stuff. And he would just kind of look at me like, well, what do you want me to do about it? Or just like figure it out. Or like, you brought this on yourself or something like that. And it made me so angry and it made me so frustrated and so upset until I started to realize, oh, when I used to bring this to my person before I was married to my mom, she would validate it and she would see me in it. And she'd be like, of course you're overwhelmed because you're doing, look at how much you're doing and you can do hard things, but yeah, I get it. Like, and she would meet me in it without it becoming a pity party or any of, being stuck in this victim. It wasn't that, but she would just validate it. And that is something that even now my kids are so little, like when they get home from school or something and they're just like, I can tell that they're done or they're, nitpicking at each other or fighting over a Barbie or something. I'm like, hey, I get it. Like, you're 4 and you did a lot of stuff today. It must have been a really big day today. Or, you just meeting them in their experience and then showing them like, yeah, you can do hard things. You have skills. You were made to do things like this. You've been given a lot because there's a big calling on your life and you are stretching and it's uncomfortable. And I get all of that, but I also see where you're at and there's a reason and I'm not going to dismiss it.
Oh, this is also big and important. I tend to help by minimalizing things, and I catch myself in that, and I'm trying to change this. Being like, oh, it's not that bad, and I'm learning now that that's not what a person wants to hear.
Yeah,
exactly. You have to say
self-talk.
Yes. Yeah, you have to. Yes, it's bad for you. I understand you're sad or hurt or disappointed or whatever. As you say, meet them where they are, and that's I'm still working on that because my minimalizing comes from the heart. It comes from trying to take the pain away. It's like, oh, it's not that bad, but that doesn't work. That's the wrong medicine.
Yeah, and sometimes too, we want to say that it's not that bad or all these things because we think that we're fearful that they'll stay stuck there. Yeah. Or that will become like a pattern. And so there's a tension there, right? We don't want to like feed into a whining or a complaining or whatever it is. But there is a moment where, meeting them is actually the power move.
Oh, wow. That's such a big one. I want a coaching hour just for that, to learn that. Do we have more lessons?
Yeah, I think maybe the last one for today is really, I guess it comes down to the name of the podcast, really. She always kind of had this sense that like calm was her superpower. And in naming the podcast, The Calm Mom, I really kind of wrestled over that name because I didn't want to be part of this problem. I think it's a problem of this expectation that moms feel to always be calm, because that is ridiculous. Because we are human beings and we actually want to experience the full range of emotions, and life will come at us and it's just impossible to be calm always. So we don't want to put that on ourselves. The goal is actually resilience, right? The goal is to be able to experience the really high highs and the really low lows, and then be able to get back to a quote unquote sense of calm. And I just remember like she had, 5 kids under the age of 8. I remember Sunday mornings in particular, because she always took us to church, that she would get 5 kids ready by, I don't know, 8:30 in the morning or whatever time we left the house. And this was a Catholic church. This was like Sunday best, like we had all our dresses and she was there ready and my dad was ready. And we would be like, she would walk. I hated it. I'll be honest. I hated it. And she would march us all the way up to the front of the church and we would sit in the first row every Sunday, 7 of us. And I was so embarrassed as a kid, I remember. But through all of that, when I look back, I'm like, she was never flustered in that. Like, I don't know if my memory is skewed maybe, but like, I don't remember the mornings of like, get your shoes on or like, get out of the house or you be quiet. Like she would have coloring books and crayons. She would have little, Cheerios and bags for us or whatever it was. And I just remember the sense of like, she just wasn't flustered by all of the chaos that comes with a family of 5 young kids. Oh. And I don't know if it's so much a lesson, but I just remember like seeing that and being like, oh, there's something to that. There's something to that. There's something unwavering in that. There's a quiet strength in that. There's an ability to show up with a sense that, this quiet control and this quiet confidence. And it's something I've really sought after, I think. Like I try to remind myself, like I will not always be calm, but I always want to be able to return to a place of calm. I don't want to get stuck in the depths and I don't want to get stuck in the high mountaintops either. And there's so much power that comes from my ability to regulate, my ability to return to myself and that sense of calm in all spaces, right? Like even as a business owner, that is my greatest superpower. It's not something I've, learned in a textbook or some skill here or the way I manage my team. It's like my ability to regulate my emotions and my nervous system through all of it is really so powerful.
How do you think she did it? Do you think she was just like that? Or did she have to do something to keep this calm?
I think part of it is relative. Like we all have a window of tolerance, right? We all have a zone within which we can experience life without becoming dysregulated. And when I think of it just now, it's such a good question. She grew up in a family with really a single caregiver, her mom, raising 10 kids. So in her mind, or maybe in her conditioning and the capacity within that window of tolerance, like for her to raise 5 kids, it might have felt chaotic to someone who was an only child raising an only child. But her, in that sense, her capacity was so large because this was only half of what she had known. So I think part of that is just conditioning. But I think another part of it is probably a not so healthy part. And it's that you're just so used to chaos that it doesn't feel chaotic. I think your nervous system reads it as chaos, right? Which is why I think over time, her body was holding so much stress that she wasn't releasing that shut her down. It shut her down. So over time, I'm not sure that that's a different lesson. That's kind of where we started. But I think part of the zone within which she could operate without becoming dysregulated or losing her cool was a lot wider than what I saw with, aunts and uncles who had 1 kid or 2 kids and still couldn't get them to church on time, right? My mom would be like, they can't get them to church on time. They only have 1 or whatever. Like she almost wore that as a badge of honor. But I think it just came from, a practice of having a lot going on and being able to stay steady through it.
That's really a beautiful full circle. But now I have to ask you a very important question. Was there anything important she was not able to teach you?
Yeah. I mean, we kind of touched on it, but I think the biggest thing to me that she was not able to teach me was that it is good and even vital to have your own passions and prioritize your marriage and all of these things that do come before your children that for her didn't. Like my husband and I are very intentional about the fact that our marriage comes before our kids. He is my priority before my children. And that feels very counterculture. And a lot of women will bristle when I bring that up, especially when they come to me for coaching and there are, issues in their relationships, their romantic relationships, their marriages, their partnerships. And the more I live it and the more I see it, I really think it's a truth is that, again, I'll speak for maybe Americans or, Western cultures, that we have the priorities wrong and we serve our children and we give them everything. And we're so attuned to their every need. And we neglect our marriages or relationships. And I'm not talking about always, right? Like there are periods and seasons and moments where my children will have to come first just because they literally cannot feed themselves or like put their shoes on, like I'm not talking about that, but I'm saying big picture. Like, and here's what happened with my parents. My youngest brother turned 18. My parents had been married, 30 something years, and they got divorced. And it's almost like they were waiting. I don't know how long. I was never a part of those conversations.
Wow.
For all of us to be out of the house. And then they're like, holy shoot, we don't even know each other anymore. We've been so like head down raising these kids, and they did a great job. Like, without sounding it's like a pompous jerk, like they raised 5 awesome kids. Like we're awesome. And we're doing big things all over the world. But then when we were gone and they're like, what is the entity of our marriage? Like, I don't think they even knew who they were. They started having kids, 25 years ago. And here we are 25 years later. And like, we're not the same people. I don't even know what you like or who you are anymore. And they divorced.
How did you deal with it?
I mean, how does anyone deal with it? I don't, not well, but also not tragic. I think it caught them by surprise. I think there was some grief involved. Certainly. I think it was a moment of profound self-rediscovery and growth and maturity and accountability. And I'm so grateful for them and for myself as their child and for my children as their grandchildren that that's not the end of their story, because a few years later, they remarried.
Oh, this is becoming more and more interesting.
I didn't see that coming.
No.
But the lesson within all of that is just like, I think they lost who they were, and they lost their marriage in raising their family. And it took a divorce for them to really rediscover individually. And part of the lesson there is that, like, in order to have a healthy marriage, you've got to have 2 healthy individuals, right? And if there's a codependency, or if there's, whatever there is, it's just not going to work. So it was almost like their time apart allowed them both to grow individually in ways they wouldn't have together, and then come back stronger. And their marriage now is so different. Like when they were divorced, and then they started talking to each other, and then they started going on walks together, and then they started hanging out. Like, I remember one of my brothers graduated from college, and the whole family was there for it. And this is the period where my parents were like, it sounds so weird to say, but they were like dating again. Yeah. And all 5 of us were like, I'm going to throw up. Like my dad would be like, I'm going to go to the grocery store. My mom would be like, I'm coming too. Like they were like children. And it was just interesting to watch, something that we hadn't been a part of initially when they fell in love, to watch it happen again. And their relationship now is so different. The way they speak to each other is different. They have fun together. They have hobbies together. In 30 years they were married initially, they never traveled. I don't know if they ever even got on an airplane. And now they're going to France in September, and then they're going to Morocco for Christmas. And I'm like, holy moly. Like, thank God you guys figured this out.
Oh my God. That's amazing. But while you're talking, I'm thinking you're talking about the relationship, but I would like, if I may, to say you can substitute the marriage and your husband with yourself, and say, don't lose who you were before you had kids and before all of this.
Oh yeah.
Don't divorce yourself because you had kids.
Yeah. And sometimes even when we talk about self-care, we talk about it in the sense of like, you got to take care of yourself and whatever, so you can be a better mom. And it's like, sometimes I want to just take that and like ball it up and throw it in the garbage, because it's like, yes, but also because you deserve that. Yeah. Right. You deserve to have a full cup, not just so you can spill out and take care of others around you, but because you deserve a full cup. And so many of the women that I coach, and myself, I'll lump myself into this, is like, you ask them to describe themselves. And moms in particular will start saying things like, I'm really generous, I'm really helpful, right? I'm really kind. And it's like all of these attributes that really have to do with their relation to others, their relationship to others, what they can do for others. And I'm like, that's all good. Like, I know you're an awesome mom, but like, let's separate that for a second. Like, who are you actually? Like, what do you love about yourself that has nothing to do with anyone else? And it can be really hard to even think of some of these things because it's not how we're wired, or it's not how we're conditioned, maybe is a better word to say it. So I agree with you 100%. It's like, man, rediscover. If you're listening to this and you're like, I haven't done anything that really makes me excited, like, that bubbly joy that kind of bubbles up in your chest. Like, when is the last time you felt that? When is the last time you were so excited to wake up because you had some new project or idea in front of you, or your creativity was overflowing because like the juices are just going because you're in your wheelhouse, you're living in alignment. And it really requires a deep rediscovery of who we are in different seasons of our life. And we cannot lose that. It's such a gift we can give our children.
Absolutely. Wow, what a beautiful place to end. And I promise, before falling asleep, I'm going to do this exercise tonight of who am I?
Yeah, I think that's a great journaling exercise. Who am I that has nothing to do with others?
Else. Exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
Michelle, thank you so much for this. This was really, really very, very inspiring. I hope for my listeners as much as it was for me. It really gave me a lot to think about.
Well, thank you for having me. It was such a joy.
If you enjoy Thank You Mama and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyoumama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Teider, that's Tajder. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.